At Bitcoin Amsterdam, there are so many interesting speakers and discussions. But Jeff Booth, who wrote the book The Price of Tomorrow, everybody I talk to that I want to interview him says, oh, can you ask him about Europe? Can you ask him about timing? Can you ask him about this? So he wrote a book about the deflationary pricing model of tomorrow and how the current system is going to help. So here at Bitcoin Amsterdam, I'm asking him some questions. Jeff, thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, you yesterday. So before we go into the more, the world's coming to an end and we need a new system. Yesterday you had a discussion in one of the sessions about an island, an experiment of an island. Yep. What was this about?
Madeira is trying to adopt Bitcoin and encouraging adoption of Bitcoin, not as a currency, but as a base layer technological change to try to attract technologists and business that's creating kind of where the future is moving on that standard.
A great garden to play with. So, have you been there?
Yeah. I've been there. I spent some time there. Spent some time there with the president on talking about how this strategy could work and how it's worked in El Salvador to drive massive tourism. Mm-hmm. And after the tourism, some of those people look at the country and say, "Oh, this is not a bad place to be, or it's not a bad place to start a business," and all of that thinking drives kind of more and more people into creating market forces and more, and so we looked at some of the numbers in El Salvador and massive increase in tourism and massive increase in economy, and obviously as an island nation and with Madeira wanting to prosper for their citizens, how could we use this to build that?
Yeah. So Jeff is on the board of a lot of different crypto companies. He's generally people think of you as a Bitcoin maximalist, sort of, a little bit. And then and you also have a fund. What did you do before crypto arrived?
And so I specifically, it's not crypto, it's only Bitcoin. And there's some very big reason for that if you understand the metric or how the system works and how the system works today and the plumbing of Bitcoin versus the system today. But prior to that, I was just always been a technologist. I've been an entrepreneur, and an entrepreneur kind of chooses the future and tries to build the future against a status quo. And if they're right, then they create wealth for themselves and society by delivering value to society. And so it's more of a path from being an entrepreneur that I see where the future is going.
And what was your first company which you started?
That was a company in the tech space called Build Direct, and it was like Amazon of building supplies, and it turned into about a $500 million company.
Building supplies?
Building supplies.
On top of Amazon?
No, it was like Amazon.
Like Amazon?
For building supplies.
In the US?
Yeah.
So, okay. Just a nice little tryout of a company, okay.
Yeah,
okay, so let's, so he has a famous, and he has lots of interviews about that. So let's analyze the situation. I was asked, please look at Europe, okay, so the American perspective and the European perspective, there's some differences. How would you analyze the situation we're in now?
Okay, let's start at the highest level, and so we see technology is deflationary. So technology produces productivity, and that productivity reduces prices.
Yeah.
So anything that stops that productivity from reducing prices must in turn concentrate that wealth in very few hands. It must. So what
bureaucracy always puts money into few hands because it limits competition. Yeah, because bureaucracy is a lot of times governments interfere, and that is also a relationship with the difference between income.
It's a relationship. But let's say, what is inflation? So so there's a belief today that a productivity that you can't have a productive society without inflation. Mm-hmm. It's a large, and so let's explore what is.
If you have a debt economy.
Yeah, and that's the point. On a debt-based system, requires inflation to survive. So what is inflation? Inflation is a transfer of. Inflation is the same thing as wage deflation. Mm-hmm. So the middle class and poor get transferred their wealth away in favor of the rich. who can protect their assets. And why is that? It's because wages are sticky. So now let's imagine a new system built that didn't require increasing debt forever exponentially. Let's imagine a system that was in tune with who humans are, and that it supported that and wouldn't allow manipulation of a system. Those wages being sticky would then act in reverse, because they'd be sticky on the way down too, and so there would be a transfer of wealth from the rich to the middle class and poor on that transition. It would work exactly the inverse of the system today. So now we have today a system globally where governments are trying to protect the middle class and poor.
Yeah.
And actually
by going to zero interest and by making assets available for the rich.
And they're making the problem worse. Yeah, and the problem is getting worse and worse, and it has to get worse from that system. And that system, to enable that system to survive, you have to control every aspect of the system. You have to remove the free market from the system, and you have to use coercion or control. And as you do that, and energy prices respond by going up, and other prices go up, and you impose more hardship on your society, then society turns to the very thing that is creating the problem. They ask for more of it, and the problem gets worse. So that's unfortunately where we are. And when you say,
which means that the government is reimbursing this person, that group, and this group, and that, and it tries to take every problem away and makes it in the end makes it worse.
And they make every problem worse.
Yeah.
And
we're very used to that, because all the entrepreneurs are complaining. Hey, I want my energy prices compensated. Hey, I need my COVID things to.
And we would vote for more of it, because we're not going to vote for a system that so if people are starving, or they can't pay their energy bills, then society turns inward and they turn against other people, and you have this us versus them mentality that spreads, and it actually emboldens that. But so that's the same society, and when I say society, I mean me, you. We would never vote for somebody who told us the truth and said the credit-based system is actually bankrupt unless there's way more inflation. And so we have to create more inflation. But instead they say, we're going to give you more money.
But Jeff, we just had a fantastic period where we had a very low inflation for a year. I mean, inflation has always been the way to get from one kingdom to another, from one empire to the other. The rise and fall of empires was always with inflation and huge problems. We had a very, very stable period. We didn't do too bad with the inflation, with 2%. And we had peace, with prosperity. We actually, until the government tried to protect us from big shocks, we were doing pretty well.
And that's why people don't see what ends up happening. 2% inflation has to turn into 3% inflation, then it has to turn into 4, then it has to turn into 10. And with government deficits and debt where it is today, it has to be a long-term higher inflation rate. And we don't notice a 2% theft. If somebody walked into our house and stole 2% of our things, nobody would notice. And that 2% compounds each year. People still don't notice, but the same effect is wage deflation of that. And so it's a slow burn for the middle class and poor that we don't notice.
Which we could reverse if we had it the other side. Okay. And if you look, and if technology raises productivity, prices go down, it's a big deflationary force. So technology improvement is a big deflationary proof. If the wages stay the same, then we could have another kind of society. Just talk about the old system which we're currently living in at the moment, this whole inflation thing. How long do you think, next year, when we sit here again, next year, how high do you predict that inflation will be in America?
So making predictions like that on an unstable system is a fool's errand. Okay. And why is every single decision today in the monetary system is when 12 people are going to press a button and destroy your currency more. Every single decision based on the entire economic system of the world is when people are going to destroy your currency. And why is that a big deal? Is because if they don't destroy your currency more, and so when you have the reserve asset of the world, US dollar, which is the reference rate to every other currency, and the euro, having to create inflation to be able to ensure that the credit-based system doesn't collapse in a death spiral, then you know they have to do that, but it imposes a burden on every other society, because and that's what's happening to the euro right now. That's what's happening to the UK right now, because as the US tightens, their dollar gets stronger, but all those liabilities are paid back in US dollars. Yeah. And so there's a race to try to create more dollars, which means all of the other countries suffer. So you could say that the US exports their inflation around the world through the use of the currency, and it hurts. It can, for a while, protect some people, and if you were part of this G7 union, it actually helped for a long time, but there were counterparties to that system. The counterparties to the system were Africa, the negative externalities to that system,
Asia,
South America,
China,
and they weren't. They were the negative of that system. We don't see the negative because it's not in your backyard. And then those people try to get on a boat, and they come and you go, why are they trying to get here? And because the same thing that's happening to impose the hardship on them is the system you live in. That system is breaking down, and it's breaking down at an accelerated rate. And it relies on theft at a higher degree of money. It requires of printing more money, which is theft. Now, and you notice somebody coming in your house and stealing 15% a year.
Yeah, but I mean, this has been going on for a while, right? And since the big financial crisis, we have created trillions, hundreds of trillions of dollars of debt, and still, I mean, it was amazing that we had all this money, and the inflation didn't go up. No, we needed an external shock. Like COVID, which was a huge shock. I was amazed about how stable the system stayed. And now with the gas prices, we have gas price going up factor of 6. We pay €1 per kilowatt hour here. €1, it's like it's a little bit less than $1. Yeah. And still, the system still works.
Well, so it's breaking now.
Okay.
So things like that work until they don't, because it's all based on a belief that 12 people should be able to press a button and determine what.
And those are the chairmen of the Federal Reserve Bank.
And then a global coordinated policy on top of that breaks. But let's say you do that. Let's say what's happening in Russia right now, and whatever side of the coin you're on, you could both detest Putin and agree in principle to first principles. And here's what that system would do. That system would say this: I'm going to buy your oil in dollars that are going to lose value by 10% a year, and you have to accept my trade. In other words, I get energy for free, and I'm stealing
at
from
a
your
discount.
At a discount. But I'm stealing free because I just print the money.
Okay.
And I'm using that to fund a military-industrial complex that's expanding around the world, and you have a choice. So when
America wasn't an energy importer anymore, right? I mean, they have become self-sustained, so they are not so interested anymore. They are more like, hey, we need to have the power, we need to stabilize it, etc.
So what does that look like for Europe? What does that look like for Japan? And so now, as they turn inward, and they can be self-sustainable and run their dollar system, it's going to be painful. It's going to be super painful. But other countries don't have energy security, but are on the U.S. dollar system. What do? And so now you turn into hyperinflation, and if you don't, then people starve.
I totally see that people starve. Not so much in Europe, where we have to have a higher percentage of money allocated to our energy needs, but other people have really huge problems with. Okay, so this is more the local, general kind of stuff. How do we go from one situation? We have now a currency which is, I don't know how many trillions do we have, 800 trillions or something like that in the world, 8 times the gross national product of the world, and it's everywhere, and the dollar is everywhere, and we have the SWIFT. I mean, the CBOS guys are now in Holland. I don't know if you know them, at the RAI. There's 20,000 people talking about the SWIFT system here in Amsterdam, and there's 3,600 people here at Bitcoin Amsterdam talking about, hey, what should be an alternative? too complex systems. Bitcoin is already complex. The fiat is very complex. How do you see them move in and out?
So we don't typically, most people don't experience the plumbing of a system. They don't understand the plumbing of the system. What we're talking about right now, and we're just scratching the surface of the plumbing of the existing system, and we haven't even scratched the surface of the plumbing of the new system.
No.
But they're entirely different. And because we experience value of the things on top of the system, so we measure our houses from the system. We measure everything. We measure our entire way of life. And emergent complex behavior emerges from a system. And that emergent complex behavior that we call society, if it's based on a flaw in the system or theft in the system, you can or manipulation of the system, you could expect the emergent complex behavior of society to follow that. And we have a new system that's emerging and is very, very early, but it's based on truth and it's based on hope and it's based on abundance.
And trustless.
Because it's decentralized and secure by design. And so that decentralization and security, we've never had decentralization and security together. So we've had to trust institutions for trust, but money was always more powerful than the institution. And over time, and if that wasn't true, right? So the Magna Carta, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence all enshrined rights to society that could protect us from institutions.
Yeah.
And so if money wasn't more powerful than laws, then the places with the most broken money should have the strongest laws. But we see in society the exact worse. And so today what do
you mean by that? In society, we have a strong society, we have strong institutions, we have
strong
protections, and where do we see the
and so today, what you believe that exists and is going to exist forever, because you're looking backwards in time through a narrow part of time where that has existed. And we trust that, and we impose more trust when we know that the same institutions are driving more and more manipulated money to survive, and that more manipulated money is accruing in the top income earners and the top wealth holders, and they lobby to be able to protect their advantage, and those lobbyists, when they go to court to protect their advantage, and that system changes laws in favor of the system.
It makes society more corrupt because of the high equalness and that kind of stuff.
And so the other system works exactly in reverse, because it's based on the truth. If you look at now, it's so early in that new system, it's confusing, and the system we live in is 4 orders of magnitude bigger than Bitcoin. Yeah. So it's so much bigger, and we measure everything we measure a system from the system, and we can't see what a new system emerging could produce. And so it's pretty normal in technology, it's pretty normal in anything, to be able to miss what's happening in a new system because it starts so small, and it favors the people furthest away from the monopoly. So if you want to see Bitcoin adoption rate and you want to see the biggest global transfer of wealth, you're going to see the biggest global transfer of wealth to nations that move first or people that move first. And a lot of those nations are furthest away from the money monopoly, like in Africa or in South America.
Yeah. So I have some other things which are happening, but let's see. You saw it now happening in El Salvador, right? How was that experience? And a young president coming up with a crazy idea, implementing it in a crazy short time, and drawing all kinds of attention, and it didn't break down. So how do you evaluate that experiment, number one?
So it's early in the experience. So I went to see for myself. Yeah. And what you would hear in people in promoting Bitcoin is you would hear everything's great. El Salvador's fantastic. Everybody's using Bitcoin. No. And that's not true. No. Nor is what you'd hear from the existing system is he's a dictator, everything's bad, what is he doing, and everything else. And both of those things are nuanced but not true. It's a frame of reference. Yeah. And so what do you see when you go to the ground in El Salvador and talk to the people? You see hope. You see hope for a better future. You see it's early in Bitcoin adoption. It's very early, but you see businesses moving there. You see people moving there. You see cab drivers accepting Bitcoin and talking about how it saved their family. And so when you see the actual human interaction.
And why was that? By accepting Bitcoin? Because it's a Lightning protocol, and a lot of times it immediately gets transferred to dollars. You know, because that's the official currency, so it's just an in-between system. Why is it changing society?
No, because what ends up happening is that transfer on Lightning, which costs a penny and does it really fast, as a whole bunch of Bitcoiners, there's 170 million people in Bitcoin in the world today, go to El Salvador and creates tourism, then they start interacting with people accepting Bitcoin. And those people accepting Bitcoin have more of the share of the tourism, and they start talking and they start learning about what's happening. And some of them stop just accepting Bitcoin as a transaction medium, and they start storing their value in Bitcoin.
Yeah. So if you have 100 companies, everybody got their $30 or $40, right? Everybody could get their free Bitcoin account and basically store 40, and then they could basically spend it or keep it. Do you have any kind of numbers?
Small amount of people.
Everybody spent it.
Everybody spent it, and I would say a very small number of people kept it, and that was an Archivo wallet. That was a centrally controlled wallet, but because Bitcoin is an open protocol, open system, it drove in all of this competitive response and new market entries and everything else that are creating value. So when you go there and you see the hope from that community all over, it's really powerful.
Okay, on the island. Okay, let's. We have now the island as a second place, and maybe some other ones will come. I went to CBOS, so this conference of Swift, and you know what everybody's talking about?
Bitcoin?
No. CDBC, central bank digital. Everybody's talking about, okay, the central banks are going to take over. They're basically going to be the providers of money. It's not going to be the commercial banks, blah, 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 blah. And everybody's really being inspired about, you know, that you can have a transaction from you to you and the money actually transfers instead of a very complex system. Is that going to save the system?
I can understand. Blockbuster, before Blockbuster failed, the year before they failed, they added candy aisles to their stores, because what people want when they rent a movie is candy and popcorn. And the year before they failed, they had a really great year because it was true on the existing system, and they never saw Netflix coming because it operates completely different, from the system, I completely understand why a CBDC is going to be tried. But what it actually does is, a CBDC, you could say it's surveillance disguised as money.
It gives much more control for the state.
It gives much, and so if somebody could give you money through a CBDC and they can control every transaction, they can also take you off of a system without your say. And that say could be, if you look at what's happening in China on a CBDC, it could be your thing that lets you out of the house doesn't let you out of the house. It turns red if you say something against the state. And so once you transfer your power to a CBDC, and remember why. Let's go back to first principles. Why? Is because technology is producing more and more value and should make us allowed to live cheaper and reduce our work. But our existing system requires prices to go up, and it requires more manipulation to be able to do that. So why a CBDC? So why is this need for the price to go to make sure that the debt doesn't kill us? The debt is reduced at a certain space. Because the debt can't be paid back. So you have to. So let's use a real example. Photography today. Photography today. 15 years ago, you took less photos. Today, you have an abundance in photos, and they're all free. Kodak was the largest monopoly in photography, and if you think about what that looked like, with their supply chain, with their stores, with the buying cameras, with film and everything else, and everything it took, all of the people it took to run that system, versus photography today, which is way less people, and you get way more, and there's free photos, free editing software, free everything, and you take way more photos. You curated abundance. Where does that show up in GDP? It doesn't.
It doesn't.
That productivity.
And I mean, everything, phones and computers, everything, all the technology produces better, more at a lower price.
So that productivity
yeah.
is deflationary.
Yeah.
And the way to rob that productivity, so that productivity should free our time. And the natural course is we should be able to work less as prices are falling, as our time. But it's not the
Keynes already came with that statement for such a long time ago.